trying to turn her off. So basically trying to ignore her. It's not my problem. Right. But when it came to the press, and we've had a few press stories, and their names actually specifically being identified in those media pieces, they then have changed their tune. So I'd like to thank as well our local media up here for doing their great job and being transparent and making these landlords accountable.
Finally, Felicity, in just a few seconds here. So what would the proposed bylaw do?
The example that we've used in terms of this proposal is Greytown. So it's not a new concept, and it's where the actual main town centre, which in Kaitaia relates to the central business district area, would actually have the bylaw related to the amenity, so the facade of the building, and that being maintained in a good state.
And Greytown's looking very good.
Yep.
Yes.
This is interesting. Okay.
The only thing I'd say about it is that it's important to not fall into the San Francisco trap. San Francisco has bylaws that mean basically building owners cannot change them. You cannot change anything. It's so expensive and difficult to do. And that has contributed to a housing crisis because there's no density possible. Kaitaia has a problem that it can solve pretty easily along the lines that are being proposed, I think, and I think it's fantastic that you're doing that. I just hope that it isn't so inflexible that you're describing exactly what colour buildings have to be or exactly what can be done to modernise them.
Well, Felicity, you've got a beautiful community there, so look after it, and I look forward to visiting one day again.
Thank you. Kaitaia is a fantastic place, 20 beaches within 20 minutes.
Yeah.
20 beaches?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
yes, it's our best kept secret.
There's a panel
Not
topic.
anymore.
I'm coming back to that one. 20 beaches, 20 minutes. There's wonderful stuff. And Simon Wilson, Janet Wilson, kia ora to you both. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Tomorrow I am back, as always, with you. 3:45, I'll be there. For now, it's Lisa Owen and Checkpoint.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere nei, a gang tangi shuts down public transport and closes at least half a dozen Ōpōtiki schools as hundreds of patch members pour into town. We asked the police what they're doing about it as the homicide investigation continues. The driver of a bus that crashed after a wedding in Australia's Hunter Valley, killing at least 10 people, is granted bail. Women live longer but will retire with way less in their KiwiSaver than their male counterparts. So how does that add up? Qantas takes on its frenemy Air New Zealand with flights to the Big Apple. Tex and his Lexus, the monopoly-busting entrepreneur, offering a chunky reward for his stolen think tank on wheels.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, good afternoon. I'm Karen McCarthy. Police are firm there is no danger to students in the Bay of Plenty town of Ōpōtiki, despite gang members rolling in for a tangi. 8 schools have closed for part or the rest of the week, while people mourn Mongrel Mob Barbarians President Stephen Taitatini, who died during an altercation on Friday. Eastern Bay of Plenty Acting Area Commander Tristan Murray says police did not advise schools to close.
I guess what's alarming for the community is just the large amount of numbers, which unfortunately, when you have a funeral of this sort of level, you're going to get a big gang presence. And we acknowledge that that's alarming for the community, and that's why we've brought in quite substantial extra police resourcing.
100 extra police are set to arrive in town tomorrow as Mr Taitatini is buried in Whakatane. Ōpōtiki primary principal Tony Howe says at least 8 schools have closed. He says the school expected the normal roll of 295 students when it opened yesterday.
And we only had about 110 turn up. So the parents were obviously, and then we had some get picked up during the day, and staff weren't happy. Yeah, it was just a worry, but we're hopeful that nothing does happen.
Tony Howe says they'll close tomorrow too and hope to reopen on Thursday. Auckland Council is still in backroom talks with central government about how much funding it will put towards voluntary buyouts of storm-hit homes. There are about 700 high-risk properties in New Zealand, of which about 400 are in Auckland, but that excludes landslide-affected homes, such as in Muriwai. Auckland Council Group Recovery Manager Matt Tucker says they are still negotiating who will foot the bill.
Central government has made a commitment to that, so their prospects are good. I couldn't talk to how that will work right now because I simply don't know the answers. There are urgent discussions between central government and Auckland Council taking place as we speak to try and get through that.
Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson earlier said the government would have to pay for more than half the buyout cost. The Gore District Council has voted not to receive a petition calling for its Chief Executive Stephen Parry to resign. Mayor Ben Bell and Mr Parry aren't speaking, and the fallout has caused ongoing problems. A group of councillors last month called on Mr Bell to step down, but backed down from a public vote of no confidence. The petition came in response. Almost 5,000 people signed it, however, most were not from Gore. Deputy Mayor Keith Hovell described the petition as no different from a Facebook post with a bunch of likes. Several other councillors spoke strongly against it. Only Ben Bell voted against the motion not to receive the petition. A former Gloria Vale Christian community farm manager says he wanted to take responsibility for past failings by admitting to beating two 11-year-old boys. John Reddy has been sentenced to 3 months community detention at the Timaru District Court for hitting the boys with a metal fence implement while supervising their work in 2015. Outside court, Reddy said he didn't want to make excuses.
The way that the community that I came from run for cover and deny everything and, in my opinion, just flat out lie when being faced with what they've done, I certainly didn't want to do that.
In sentencing, Judge Campbell Savage said Reddy, who was born and raised at the West Coast community, had spent enough of his life in chains. An Auckland Business Association says organisations need to pull their weight if they want the central city to remain a vibrant place. The Auckland CBD is coming back to life after years of pandemic slowdown and construction disruption. Heart of the City Chief Executive Viv Beck says when it comes to infrastructure projects, it's the job of organisations, including the council, to ensure the central city runs as smoothly as possible. She says they are seeing around 1 million people on the streets each week. In sport, the Denver Nuggets have won basketball's NBA title for the first time with a 94-89 win over the Miami Heat in Game 5 of the best-of-7 series. The victory gives them a 4-1 series win and ends a 47-year championship wait for the city. Denver's Nikola Jokic was named the finals MVP, with the Serbian forward again leading his side's efforts by scoring 28 points and grabbing 16 rebounds.
It was an ugly game, we couldn't make shots, but at the end we figured out how to defend, and job is done, we can go home now.
The challenges facing women's football globally continue to boil away in the lead up to next month's World Cup in New Zealand and Australia. Canada's players are involved in industrial action with the national body. England's have been caught in a club versus country battle. And a former French captain has been recalled after a 2-year absence due to a falling out with a coach. Despite the problems, FIFA's head of women's football, Sarai Barraman, doesn't believe they take the gloss off the tournament.
And if a World Cup can bring those challenges to the surface, expose them, and ultimately help us to find a way to overcome them, I think that's a healthy part of our growth as a sport and something that's really necessary.
And a group led by Mark Ellis and including fellow former All Blacks Tane Randall and John Timu have bought an 11% stake in the Highlanders Super Rugby franchise. That's the news.
Australians mourn after yesterday's deadly bus crash.
It's one of these instances that's just really hard to wrap your head around. It's the worst traffic accident in Australia in more than 30 years.
Farmers welcome National's emissions policy.
We are recognising that it is good policy.
Greenpeace isn't so keen.
We've got delay after delay after delay. We're 20 years into this delay now, right?
And celebrating with Matariki milk.
It's about celebrating Aotearoa. It's celebrating something that comes from the land.
News to start your day. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
a network funded through New Zealand On Air. Lisa Owens here next with Checkpoint after the short forecast from Met Service to midnight on Wednesday. For Northland, mostly fine, isolated showers clearing tomorrow morning. Auckland to North Taranaki, including Tamaranui, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, fine with frosts in the morning. South Taranaki to the Kapiti coast, including Taihape, fine at first, cloudy periods and isolated showers developing this afternoon or evening. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington, showery about and north of the Wairoa district, but only cloudy periods and isolated showers elsewhere. Showers gradually clear from the south tomorrow afternoon and evening. Nelson, Buller and Westland, fine apart from morning fog patches, frosty tomorrow morning. Fiordland, fine today, cloud and isolated showers developing tomorrow morning. Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine, cloudy periods and isolated showers near the coast, clearing tomorrow morning, and the Chatham Islands, showers. It's 5:07.
Kia ora rā e ho, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint i tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. 8 Bay of Plenty schools closed today because of fears gang violence could break out after a prominent mongrel mob barbarians leader was killed in Ōpōtiki over the weekend, and hundreds of patched members have flooded into town for his tangi. Police say that Stephen Taiatini died in an incident on St John Street on Friday night. The heavy presence of gang members will see police numbers swell too, with 100 more officers expected to be in the district by tomorrow, the day of the funeral that will be held in Whakatane. Other public services have shut down due to the heavy gang presence, and the Prime Minister's waded in, saying it's a situation police need to get on top of. Ōpōtiki Primary School Principal Tony Howe says his school decided to close for 2 days after so few students showed up yesterday.
Like yesterday we were open and we've got 295 students at school and we only had about 110 turn up. So the parents were obviously, and then we had some get picked up during the day and staff weren't happy. Yeah, it was just a worry, but we're hopeful that nothing does happen. So it's more precautionary and hopefully we'll be back on deck on Thursday.
Tony Howe says the mongrel mob are a familiar presence in the town.
The mob have been present in Ōpōtiki for a long, long time, and they're generally very well behaved. Like we've got gang parents in our school, and they come along and support their kids like anyone else, and come to interviews, and like generally speaking, there is no issue. So it was just a precautionary thing, and people were worried, but we're hopeful that nothing does happen.
Meanwhile, the Eastern Bay of Plenty Acting Area Commander Tristan Murray says police did not order schools to close, but he understands why they have.
We didn't give the schools any advice. They did that off their own back. And in at least 2 of the schools' cases, I'm not surprised because of their location in Ōpōtiki, they basically back onto where the gang activity, the gathering of the gang is at the moment, the mongrel mob gang. So, we didn't advise them to close. That was their own prerogative.
Is there a danger to students?
No danger at all. In fact, at the moment it's very quiet in Ōpōtiki, apart from a large gathering of gang members. There's not a lot going on at the moment.
So to be clear, you didn't offer them any advice and schools did not consult with you prior to closure to get your opinion on the situation in terms of safety?
Yeah, no, that was their own prerogative, and you'd probably want to discuss that with the ministry as to why they've all closed. But I totally can empathise with why the schools close to the current gathering of gang members closed. Totally empathise.
So, in saying that though, the police see no danger that would warrant a school closure? No
danger. No.
Oh, okay. The Prime Minister has said it's an unacceptable situation that a town is brought to a standstill like this and, quote, this is a situation that the police need to get on top of. Are the police on top of this?
Oh, we're well on top of it. In fact, it's been quite underwhelming and I've got to say the gang members present at the moment, the vast majority of them are very well behaved. I went past their gathering a couple of hours ago and there's a bouncy castle out the front for the kids. there's definitely no nefarious behaviour going on. I guess what's alarming for the community is just the large amount of numbers, which unfortunately when you have a funeral of this sort of level, you're going to get a big gang presence. And we acknowledge that that's alarming for the community, and that's why we've brought in quite substantial extra police resourcing.
How many more police officers do you have there?
So from tomorrow there'll be 100 extra police in Ōpōtiki, and that's on top of the large contingent of investigators working on the current homicide. The past few days we've had an increased police presence. In fact, since Saturday, we've had an increased police presence which has been around the 50-odd officers, and we're very visible in the community. And we're aware that this sort of thing is alarming for the community, so we're out there doing our patrolling and suppressing any activity that may or may not occur. And at the moment, I can honestly say there's not a lot happening here. People are still going to cafes and supermarkets and continuing on with life.
If the police are in control of the situation in Ōpōtiki, why do you need so many more officers there, and why have so many schools closed?
Yeah, hey, when you've got potentially up to 500 gang members coming into town, it would be remiss for the police, whose duty is a guardian of the public, to not have sufficient, possibly even more than sufficient resources available, and that's what we've done. That's exactly why we've done it.
You're kind of making it sound like there's no risk involved with gang members.
Hey, there's always a risk. But and there's a perception of risk as well. But with the resources,
it's more than a perception, isn't it, Inspector? We're told consistently by the police that gangs are involved in peddling drugs and violence and weapons. And by your own count, you have several hundred gang members in a very small town where people are concerned about the death of an individual and what may follow from that.
Yeah, Lisa, at the moment there's nothing happening except for gang members mourning the loss of one of their own. So that's the reality on the ground at the moment. I mean, they've even got a bouncy castle up for the kids, etc.
Isn't that part of the perception, though, managing the perception? And that is the difficulty with gangs, this appearance of being community-minded, yet you have a community too scared to send their children to school?
It's about allowing them to mourn for their loved one, and everyone's got the right to respect that. And our communication with the gangs is that if they step out of line, the New Zealand police will be taking action against them. There's no ifs or buts around that. So that's been made very clear to them. And we have sufficient resources here, Lisa, to suppress any activity to the contrary.
How long are you going to keep those extra resources there?
Yeah, it's a bit of an operational matter, but we'll see how things pan out over this week. It may well continue into next week as well, but I wouldn't be expecting the large numbers of gang members to remain in Ōpōtiki into next week.
But often what can happen, Inspector, is that there is a period of respectful mourning, and when that ends, all bets are off.
That's why we've got additional resourcing for tomorrow. Yeah, to suppress that activity before it takes off. But whether that will occur or not is anyone's guess.
But is that the fear, Inspector, that after the respectful mourning period is over, that there could be some, retaliation or conflict between different gangs?
That's why we've got the additional staff in here. I'm confident that we'll be able to, as well as the korero that our gang liaison officers are having with the gang members, we're confident that that won't be the case.
And that was the Eastern Bay of Plenty Acting Area Commander Tristan Murray. Now, the police team investigating the killing of Stephen Taiatini is appealing for information about a burnt-out vehicle found on Waiōtahi Valley Road on Sunday. And the police are reminding people they can call Crime Stoppers anonymously with any information about the investigation. It is 5:15. Interested in your views on that. Several hundred gang members have arrived in the small town of Ōpōtiki. Police say what's business as usual. They're just there keeping a watching brief. Kia mo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. You can text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A scathing report has flagged concerns about prisoners' rights in jails around the country. Almost a third of inmates have been separated from others for extended periods of time, with some spending years in solitary confinement. The Independent Office of the Inspectorate says the isolation and segregation need the closest of scrutiny by oversight agencies. Some prisoners had little to see and do while in solitary confinement and left for too long. That can affect their health and well-being. Rachel Graham has more.
The Chief Inspector, Janice Adair, says the issue of solitary confinement in prisons has long concerned her, and this is the first time they've been able to get a sense of how long and how often people are sent to segregation. The report found that 29% of the more than 5,000 prisoners assessed had spent time separated from other prisoners.
Segregation is a legitimate tool. I make that quite clear, and it's important that I do say that. But in some cases, we found that segregation was almost being used as a de facto punishment.
Janice Adair says a lack of data available meant they couldn't say why people are segregated, how long they spent segregated, and how many people spent time in solitary confinement. Solitary confinement, under the UN's Mandela rules for prisoners, is deemed being kept isolated for more than 15 days. She says it's likely many of the prisoners would have experienced solitary confinement, some for months or even years. Janice Adair says solitary confinement can cause profound and long-lasting effects.
And the impacts, both physically and psychologically, the sensory deprivation, headaches, heart palpitations, and importantly, psychological effects in terms of lethargy, anxiety, panic attacks. You know, these are very real experiences that men and women who we interviewed during the course of our inspection told us that they were experiencing.
Campaigns Director at Amnesty International, Lisa Woods, says the poor record keeping is unacceptable.
This in itself is deeply concerning, that the government could not provide data to say whether or not prolonged solitary confinement has occurred and whether or not a human rights violation had occurred. And this is important because if robust data about what's happening is not being collected, we just don't know what's happening.
A lawyer who has worked on Bill of Rights cases for prisoners says the Mandela rules prohibit prolonged solitary confinement, defined as more than 15 days of being isolated for more than 22 hours a day. Amanda Hill says there could have been numerous breaches of law by corrections.
The Corrections Act provides for punishments for misbehaviour after a hearing, like an internal hearing in the prison, but those aren't happening. So what's happening is that file notes or misconducts are being used as a basis for segregation, which circumvents the whole disciplinary process. So I think that's a real concern.
Corrections Chief Custodial Officer Neil Beals says Corrections has accepted all recommendations made in the report. Mr Beals says the Chief Inspector is right to conclude that the administration of segregation, including record keeping and reporting, are areas which they must address. He says work has started on a long-term, system-wide plan for enduring change that recognises potential risks prolonged isolation can have on people.
And it is 19 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme, whether it be the gang presence in Ōpōtiki and the police response to it, or putting prisoners into solitary confinement. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to the headlines now. Ko Karen anō tēnei.
Thanks, Lisa. About 100 extra police are set to arrive in the Bay of Plenty tomorrow for the tangi of a gang president who died in an altercation in Ōpōtiki on Friday. 8 schools have decided to close, but police say they did not tell them to do so and there is no danger to students. A highly critical report is highlighting concerns over the rights of inmates in the country's 18 prisons. The Office of Inspectorate says almost a third of prisoners spent time separated from others over the course of a year, including solitary confinement. The Chief Inspector, Janice Adair, says it's the first time they've been able to get a sense of how long and how often people are sent to segregation. Gore District councillors have voted not to receive a near 500 signature petition calling for the resignation of Chief Executive Stephen Parry. Mr Parry and Mayor Ben Bell are not on speaking terms, and the fallout is causing ongoing issues. Auckland Council is still in talks with central government about how much money it will put towards voluntary buyouts of storm-hit homes. There are about 700 high-risk properties in New Zealand, of which about 400 are in Auckland, but that excludes landslide-affected homes. And Kiwis are about to have two options when flying to the Big Apple, with Qantas set to launch an Auckland to New York City flight tomorrow. But Air New Zealand, which launched its flight to the city that never sleeps last September, is welcoming its new rival, saying competition is a good thing. On the traffic front, a bit to get through in Rangitata in Canterbury. A serious crash just before 5 has closed State Highway 1 between Edgar Road and Farm Road. If using State Highway 79, the intersection with State Highway 1 is closed. Please use an alternate route. Detours in place. In Wellington, the Mount Vic Tunnel will be closing tonight from 9 till 5:30 tomorrow morning for monthly maintenance. Also, State Highway 1 Nauronga Gorge. Plan ahead for lane closures at the gorge tonight for barrier replacement work. Plan ahead for roadwork closures on Auckland's motorways tonight, including northbound lanes between Greville Road and Ōtōtiki Valley Road on the North Shore. And in the Waikato, plan ahead for field days kicking off tomorrow at Mystery Creek. Expect heavy traffic. Allow extra time for all journeys. We'll have more news headlines and any traffic updates for you around 20 to 6.
Ngā mihi, Karen. The challenges facing women's football around the world continue to be exposed in the lead up to next month's World Cup in New Zealand and Australia. Canada's women are involved in industrial action with the national body. England's Lionesses are caught in a club versus country battle, and a former French captain has been recalled after a 2-year absence due to a falling out with a coach. FIFA Football's Sarai Berryman isn't shying away from the issues and believes it doesn't take the shine off the global tournament.
We understand that there are a lot of challenges that our players and others involved in the sport have to overcome. And if a World Cup can bring those challenges to the surface, expose them, and ultimately help us to find a way to overcome them, I think that's a healthy part of our growth as a sport and something that's really necessary.
And we're joined now by sports reporter Felicity Reid. So, Felicity, what impact does Sarai Berryman see the World Cup having on the issues closer to home?
Well, she's a former Samoa representative and she grew up in New Zealand. So she says that she recognises the difference between what some of the European and North American players will be facing compared to the players from around the Pacific. She has been currently travelling through the Pacific and visiting some of these countries, and she says that you can't underestimate the impact of having a World Cup has on decision makers. She says that having this in this part of the world, it's the first time that a Women's World Cup has been held in the Asia-Pacific region. She says having it here, that these countries in this area have to leverage off it. They have to be able to, like a World Cup brings together all of these top brass. They bring together the FIFA president, they bring together general secretaries, they bring together all of the member association people in terms of club owners, CEOs, and having all these people together at a World Cup, it's the only time that they really get to see the full impact of what women's World Cup can do. So it's having all of these people together and showcasing the game in that way. She says that's the time when you can actually make a difference, and that moving forward that these people will actually see what this means to the women. And she says exposing the issues that the women face, even though they're different all around the world, is really important because it's an opportunity, if, as we speak about them in the media, as the fans sort of uncover it, as they look closer to see how far their team's going in these tournaments and what the issues that these women face are, that it's important to be able to use this tournament as a way to sort of unearth it, I guess, a little bit. She's not shying away from those things, and she's saying that this is an opportunity, and especially when it's in this part of the world and maybe some of the women in some of the Pacific Islands are not getting the same opportunities. It's an opportunity for them and for their administrators to take a look at what can actually be done.
OK, to cricket now. Murmurings about the Black Cap schedule for the Cricket World Cup. Tell us more.
Yes, that's right. There's been quite a delay on this. It's normally a year out from a World Cup that you would actually have a schedule in place. This official schedule is not actually out until next week. There's been a draft one floating around that most nations have had a look at and have had some feedback and input in. And ESPN Cricket Info is reporting that New Zealand will face England in the opening game on October 5. That is a replay of the 2019 World Cup final, the one that the Black Caps fans don't really want to talk about. The last ball dramatic, super over tiebreaker loss there, the one they probably haven't recovered from. So they're going to be able to watch that again as the opening game of the tournament. They're also saying that New Zealand will be playing host India in Dharamsala on October 22, Australia at the same venue a week later, South Africa a few days after that, and rounding out the round robin against Pakistan with a day match. So these are all interesting sort of permutations for this tournament as we wait, I guess, to see if this is really confirmed and set in stone, especially as it's nearly 4 months out from the tournament. The tickets aren't actually on sale because these matches aren't locked in. So fans wanting to go to the World Cup in India, cutting it a little bit close for them to be able to actually travel and make their own arrangements to attend this event.
Well, pencil it in the meantime, Felicity. That's our sports reporter, Felicity Reid. Qantas's boss is in the country touting his new route, which is in direct competition with Air New Zealand. Kiwis now have 2 options to fly direct to the Big Apple. Qantas will launch its Auckland to New York City flight tomorrow, and it's promising to fly there more often and for less than Air New Zealand. Our national carrier says bring it on, and competition is a good thing. Our reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi have the story.
Qantas is stepping on Air New Zealand's turf.
We've always called Air New Zealand our frenemy, so we're friends on a lot of things, but we're also very competitive. So we're going to be big commercial competitors on this route.
That route is Auckland to New York. Air New Zealand's new flagship flight has competition. Qantas CEO Alan Joyce says it's the airline's first flight from Auckland to an international destination outside of Australia in more than 2 decades. It was a bumpy start for Air New Zealand when it launched the flight last September, facing stiff winds that forced some passengers to travel without luggage and stops in Fiji to refuel. Alan Joyce says they'll have similar contingencies to Air New Zealand, but he thinks they'll have an upper hand.
Our aircraft is lighter, it has less seats on it, so it's likely to be able to travel longer distances. We already have 2 of the 5 longest routes in the world. This will be 3 of the top 5 longest routes in the world, and we have a speciality of doing it that gives us an advantage. And then finally, we have different engines on our aircraft than Air New Zealand, which are that little bit more efficient.
Air New Zealand has flown the route nearly 200 times since September. Chief of Corporate Affairs Matt Boland says demand is growing as more people are using the route not just to get to the States, but also through to Europe. As for other airlines entering their territory,
competition is good for both of us. Qantas is a good airline, so is Air New Zealand, so customers will win out of this. It'll sharpen price, it'll sharpen surface, and it'll raise the profile of the route, hopefully get more people flying, which again will only help more and more people see New Zealand.
The Qantas flight is currently selling for $2,100 return. Air New Zealand's fares are slightly more expensive at $2,400. Qantas is adamant competitive prices will be sticking around for Kiwis.
We will be very competitive on this route, and the intent is to continue with those type of airfares.
Qantas will also have more Trans-Tasman flights available from October. With smaller aircraft on the way, they'll also be flying from Brisbane to Wellington. The latest data from Stats New Zealand shows there was a 35% drop in New Zealanders travelling overseas in April this year compared to pre-COVID levels. International visitor numbers are also down around 30%. But Alan Joyce isn't worried, saying it will take time for the aviation industry to bounce back.
So we're back internationally at 85% of our pre-COVID capacity. We have more capacity on the Trans-Tasman to New Zealand to Australia than we had before COVID.
Qantas is set for takeoff to the Big Apple tomorrow afternoon, taking its first bite out of Air New Zealand's market.
It is 5:30. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news now. Ko taku hoa I nai nei ko Nona Peltier, who joins me in the studio. Housing confidence appears to be improving. Who says? And give us the numbers.
Well, we had some additional, not just confidence numbers, but we also had some QV value numbers today. So the housing survey, which is done quarterly by ASB on confidence, indicates that confidence is somewhat returning to the market, although it's not a really resounding vote yet. A net 34% of respondents expect house prices to continue to fall, all right? But that compares with 43% in the prior quarter. So fewer of them expect prices to fall. I guess that's the best you can say about it. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is that more people are convinced that the prices are hitting the bottom. And that seems to be borne out by numbers we received from the quotable value, which showed that home values fell 3.4% over the 3 months to the end of May, which is slightly slower rate of drop than the month before and the month before that. So it does seem that the rate of decline is slowing down. And that could potentially indicate that prices are close to bottoming out. Where we're seeing confidence best and where prices seem to be holding up the most is where first-time buyers are concerned. They still are quite active in the market compared with investors who, by and large, are keeping their wallets closed.
Okay, let's talk about small business owners, increasingly indecisive when it comes to investing in technology. What is the reason for that?
The election that's coming up apparently is one of the things that's preventing small businesses from making decisions. They're waiting for, I don't know what, a change of government. It's not hard to say, but there's a company called Smarketing Lab, like Marketing Lab, but Smarketing Lab. Don't laugh, it's true.
I see what they
It's
did
very
there.
clever there, you know. But anyway, they say that there's no excuse for such things because we have to invest in digital technology, whomever is the government of the day. And it's becoming increasingly so. Well, today, the chief executive of Qantas was in town and talking about how it's so important for the industry to get ahead of the curve when we're talking about AI. Much in the same way, many years ago, the industries had to work hard to get ahead of the curve of social media. So, you know, the march towards digital technology is not going to slow down, no matter who is the government. So this person is saying, get on with it. Make the decisions, spend the money now.
Tell us about the market.
Okay, so the top 50 index, it rose 0.3% today, a 37-point gain to 11,653. And that was pretty much what we were seeing in Asia, a bit more upbeat. But there's a lot of uncertainty on the horizon. We've got, for example, the U.S. Federal Reserve is going to be talking about interest rates over the next couple of days. We've got some inflation data due out tomorrow. We've got our own balance of payments. We've got our GDP numbers. There's a lot going on. And all of that adds up to uncertainty because everybody wants to know what's going to happen before they make decisions. It's a funny thing, isn't it, Lisa?
Are you going to keep your fans waiting with the dollar?
Well, I might as well tell you what it is.
Yeah,
then.
go on then.
Okay, 61.3 US cents, which is about where it was yesterday. 90.6 Australian, and it's steady at 48.9 British pence. Not a lot has changed there, but you wait. The week is young.
We wait for the next instalment. Thank you, Nona. Nona Peltier with business news there. Gore District Council's CEO isn't going anywhere after a 5,000 signature petition calling for his resignation was rejected by councillors. The public petition to remove Stephen Parry went out in direct response to a group of councillors calling for the resignation of Mayor Ben Bell. The CEO and Mayor aren't speaking, and the dysfunction at the council led them to agree in April to undertake an independent review into how things got so bad. Ben Bell presented the petition at a meeting this afternoon where most councillors said it wasn't credible.
In terms of the petition, it's actually null and void for the following reasons. Petitions need to be no more than 150 words, and this petition has more than 150 words.
We've got to ask the first question, what have we actually received? We've received some comments made on Facebook where a number of people have agreed with it. It's no different than something appearing on Facebook and getting a whole lot of likes. But what actually are they liking?
In my opinion, the petition has no legal standing or validity, and it is very malicious in its intent. It is in direct legal and moral conflict with our obligations as a good employer to the Chief Executive.
Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown was at the meeting and he joins us now. Kia ora, Timothy. What was the atmosphere like in that room?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, in a word, it was tense. The nexus of all of this is, of course, the relationship, or lack thereof, between the Mayor Ben Bell and Chief Executive Stephen Parry. Ben Bell presented the petition, as you mentioned, which will do little to improve the relationship with Mr. Parry. The public meeting, the public meeting has just recently finished. The councillors are still behind closed doors, now going into public excluded business. There was a packed public gallery to hear the petition, however. Plenty of stony faces amongst them, but there were also a couple of stony faces at the front of that room in the form of the Mayor Ben Bell and Chief Executive Stephen Parry.
So councillors were basically saying that the petition wasn't worth the paper it was written on. I mean, what were some of the reasons for that?
Yeah, that's right. So the Deputy Mayor, Keith Hovell, he was, of course, the one who led the charge to have Ben Bell resign last month. He said that none of the signatures were verifiable. There were no email addresses to follow up. There were postcodes that didn't match addresses. There were cartoon characters that were signed it. There was even Steve Parry's signature himself who had signed it. He said that this is an issue that they have to put to bed. They've expressed support for the chief executive in the past, and staff are really struggling with this. He said the staff have been abused, staff have been spat at. Another councillor, Glenys Dixon, she said the petition was disrespectful, that it was more than 150 words, and it even had her name on it, but she was adamant that she didn't sign it. Councillor Bronwyn Reid said that it was malicious in its intent, and Councillor Richard McPhail also pointed to the fact that it was only a month ago that the full council unanimously expressed their support for Chief Executive Stephen Parry and the council staff.
So, Timothy, what does this actually mean for the council now? I mean, when and how do they get on with the actual business that they're supposed to be doing?
Well, that's right. They still have an annual plan to sign off, which they plan to do later this month, only a few days before it's to come into effect. So where does the council business go from here? Well, hopefully they get on track. They claimed they were going to be doing that last month, but it's fair to say this issue is not going away. These tensions are definitely still simmering under the surface. You could see with Ben Bell and Stephen Parry's expressions tonight during the meeting. And of course, when it came time to vote on the motion not to accept the petition, it was unanimous, barring one person, the Mayor Ben Bell. He voted against that motion, meaning he probably wanted to receive this petition.
Thank you for the update, Timothy. That's Timothy Brown, RNZ reporter at that Gore Council meeting there. It is 22 minutes away from 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback now. A lot of you getting in touch about our interview with the acting inspector who is overseeing operations in Ōpōtiki, where there is a large number of gang members gathered. This is for a tangi of a local member. This person says, so gangs are fine as long as they hire a bouncy castle, make a few sandwiches for kids. I have seen firsthand the misery that gangs can cause. Kim Webby's got in touch though and says, kia ora, Lisa. I live in Ōpōtiki. I'm off to yoga now, not feeling afraid. As a whānau, we support my mokapuna's school closing. It is a comfort to have our tamariki with us in sad and difficult times for our town. Ngā mihi. Thanks for getting in touch, Kim. Someone else says, please tell us what civil liberties you would want to remove from gang members. The rights to travel, attend funerals, to drive. That from Richard. Someone else says, it is shocking that the police are so chill about 500 gang members in Ōpōtiki. The inspector mentioned their bouncy castle twice. OMG. Out of touch with how intimidating gangs are to ordinary members of the public. His role is to protect the majority, not to behave as though gangs are a legitimate community. And I think one more before we get to the headlines. Surely the police should be assuring schools that they will be fully supported and protected to have their children on site. Looks like the Mongrel mob are running the show and the police are setting themselves up to be reactive rather than being on top of this from the start. Thank you for your feedback. Do keep it coming. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address again, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to the headlines now. Anea Karen, mina pita pita kōrero.
Police say gang members in Ōpōtiki are behaving well ahead of a mongrel mob leader's burial. The tangi for mongrel mob barbarians president Stephen Taiatini, who died in an altercation on Friday, has seen an increased gang presence in the Bay of Plenty town. Around 100 extra police are being brought in. Area Commander Tristan Murray told Checkpoint that the situation is under control and there's no risk to the public. Meanwhile, National leader Christopher Luxon says the situation in Ōpōtiki is a result of the government allowing criminal criminal brazenness to take hold. At least 8 Bay of Plenty schools have chosen to close. Ōpōtiki Mayor David Moore says the town is not being held to ransom, but acknowledges anxiety levels are high. A disinformation expert says other news outlets could be publishing pro-Russian propaganda without realising it. RNZ has stood down a staff member after international wire stories about the war in Ukraine were inappropriately edited. Sanjana Hatatua says Russian propaganda has been entrenched in New Zealand's disinformation landscape for some time. Authorities in the Philippines are preparing further evacuations from areas around the foot of Mount Mayon as it looks increasingly likely to erupt. And the CEO of Qantas says its new direct route to New York will mean competitive prices for New Zealanders. Tomorrow it's launching its direct flight in competition with Air New Zealand's flagship flight, which has been operating since September. Looking at the traffic in the Rangitata, Canterbury, a serious crash just before 5 has closed State Highway 1 between Edgar Road and Farm Road. There's a southbound detour via Edgar Road, Olmain Road South and Farm Road. And if using State Highway 79, the intersection with State Highway 1 is closed. Motorists urged to use an alternate route with detours in place. The Mount Vic Tunnel in Wellington will be closing tonight from 9 o'clock for monthly maintenance till 5:30 tomorrow morning. And in the Tasman region, State Highway 6, Belgrove to Kohatsu. Plan ahead for 3 days of stop-goes at Spooner's Saddle starting tomorrow morning at 7 for slip maintenance and catch fence repairs. We'll have all the latest news at 6.
Thank you, Karen. Women live longer but will retire with 20% less in their KiwiSavers than their male counterparts, an uncomfortable equation that the Financial Markets Authority would like to turn around. The FMA says it's down to a number of factors, including women on average earning less than men, taking time out of the workplace for caregiving, but also because women often have lower levels of financial confidence and knowledge. Paul Gregory is Executive Director, Regulatory Response at the Financial Markets Authority, and he joins us now. Kia ora, Paul.
Kia ora.
What does this disparity look like when you retire? In practical terms, what does it mean?
Well, you've said the average. So on average, women have about 27k and men have 32k in their KiwiSaver balances. So on average across all people in KiwiSaver, that's about a 20% deficit for women. But it's worse as you get older. Because of the effects of compounding, obviously. So the gap gets bigger as you get older, and it just shows the advantages and the benefits of starting early and sticking at it, and the benefits to women of being confident and participating in KiwiSaver.
We'll get onto that confidence thing in a minute, but I'm wondering, how do you battle those societal factors that you as an individual may not have complete control over, like the gender pay gap and also the fact that largely women take up a lot of caring responsibilities? How do you counter that in terms of your KiwiSaver?
Well, there's various, we're a regulator, so we focus very much on making sure that when you are involved in KiwiSaver, that your providers are doing the right thing by you. But there are policy things which the policymakers can decide on about how you might want to reflect with policy settings, how women are disadvantaged by being out of KiwiSaver to leave work to have children and delayed coming back.
So the stuff that people can control, what suggestions or practical advice can you give around that?
Well, there's a lot of work that's happened around the world, including our own work, which shows that women actually do make good decisions and think well about investing in KiwiSaver. So our own survey has shown that as a starting point, that they prefer simple products with lower fees, with providers with high reputation who take an ethical approach. So it's not really an issue about the intellect that women are bringing to these decisions. It's the confidence gap to bridge the gap between doing some research and then actually making a decision to choose a provider, or perhaps to make sure they're in the right fund for them with a provider. So it's about confidence and support. It's not necessarily about decision making.
So why is there a confidence disparity?
Well, I think it's just about the wanting to get confidence to get help with the decisions, and that there's There's some men can be more confident about their own decisions and just go with it, whereas research shows that that women need to check around more and they want more support for that decision.
So how is it possible to boost women's confidence in this area then?
Well, this is something that's been recognised by women themselves in the industry. So there's a number of people who we're working with our campaign who are investment professionals themselves and who recognise that gap and step into it. So in our campaign, we are working with people who are involved in the investment industry who are great investment decision makers and are women and are helping out women with exactly the issue that we've been talking about.
What do you know about people potentially cutting back or trimming back their contributions currently when we're facing what people are describing as a cost of living crisis, or even taking out hardship payments?
So we have anecdotal information from the industry about these are tough times, and if people aren't taking out their money for hardship, then they're certainly thinking about suspending their contributions or perhaps reducing their contributions. We get hard data on that on an annual basis. But it really is, I think, a case for people to look at their annual KiwiSaver statement and just make sure that the information in there is that they're comfortable with it. And even if they do decide to suspend their contributions, to make sure that they come back to them.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. That is Paul Gregory, who's from the Financial Markets Authority. Auckland CBD is coming back to life after years of pandemic slowdown and disruption caused by construction works. The work from home trend hit the CBD hard, and that's on top of the CRL and Lower Queen Street improvements. But Heart of the City says foot traffic has bounced back strongly and downtown's enjoyed the return of cruise ships. Our reporter Finn Blackwell and camera operator Marika Habazi have the story.
With a cruise ship parked in the Waitemata Harbour on a sunny Auckland day, the city is humming. Tourists stepping off to see the sights of Auckland.
Love it. Yeah, it's really clean, it's tidy, the people are friendly.
Yeah, it's been great shopping and everything as well, so everything's here.
But just up Queen Street, the streets are humming with construction. The CBD became a ghost town during COVID, with many workers staying home. Adding to the challenge is the construction in several pockets of the city, cutting off some main roads and making the CBD experience a noisy one. These European sightseers we bumped into weren't so keen on what they'd found in the city.
I'm not a huge fan of the city, but there are some nice spots where you can hang out or just have a drink. Yeah.
I think it has its nice spots, but compared to Europe, there's a lot of vehicles and cars, so it's really busy and not really like cozy in that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that I'm missing like more cultural things to do.
But on a sunny Auckland day, the streets downtown were bustling with residents and tourists alike. Heart of the City's Viv Beck says the central city is seeing significant foot traffic again.
And we have around 1 million people a week coming through our pedestrian counts at the moment. That's a lot of people, and that is tourists, students, people who live here, people who work here, their customers, their staff, their suppliers. That is way bigger than one organisation to address these issues that are affecting the wider city and country.
When it comes to the infrastructure projects in Auckland, she says it's the job of multiple organisations, including Auckland Council, to ensure the central city runs as smooth as possible.
A lot of those things, one group might do one piece and another group does something else, so they're not always integrated, and we've been keen to see a much more integrated, less siloed plan for some of these works.
And Auckland Council's head of city centre programs, Jenny Larking, says the city is undergoing a transformation.
We're really building on the momentum of what has been done in downtown Wynyard Quarter, Karangahape Road, and really our next focus for the next few years is really Midtown. And all of that is building on the potential of the City Rail link that will make the city centre wonderful and easy to get to.
She says the results of ongoing investment in the central city speaks for itself.
We have a lot more pedestrian space. We have a lot more pleasant spaces to hang out in. We are seeing a lot more people in the city centre coming back, following COVID. We have, beautiful spaces that we're all very proud of.
But residents and tourists alike will just have to put up with a bit more construction as the City Rail Link job rolls on.
It is 10 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The driver of a bus which crashed, killing 10 people in New South Wales, has been released on bail. Shock is lingering after the fatal wedding bus crash in the Hunter Valley. New South Wales police are trying to piece together the events leading up to the crash. The 58-year-old driver has been charged with 10 counts of dangerous driving causing death and 1 count of negligent driving causing death. ABC reporter Matt Bamford has the latest.
So police have this morning for the first time confirmed that they believe the driver of the bus was travelling too fast when it rolled over at a roundabout near Greta. Brett Andrew Button appeared in court in Cessnock this morning. He's charged with 10 counts of dangerous driving occasioning death. Now, he was granted bail, although Magistrate Robert Richardson said that there was a strong prosecution case against him. However, she also said that clearly he was suffering significantly along with the rest of the community, and there was members of his family with him, we believe, in the courtroom who were audibly relieved when he was granted bail. Now, New South Wales Police have revealed they'll allege that speed was a factor in the crash, and they also say that there was heavy fog in the area that night. Acting Assistant Commissioner David Waddell said the driver failed to drive to the conditions and was too quick to approach the roundabout.
The 58-year-old male was the driver of the bus. He entered that roundabout driving in a manner that was inconsistent with the conditions. Obviously, the speed was too quick for him to negotiate that roundabout, causing the vehicle to fall onto its left side and cause those injuries. So the manner of dangers will relate to the manner in which he drove into that roundabout.
As at this stage, 3 of the 10 people who died tragically in that crash have now been identified officially. Andrew and Lynn Scott, they were a singleton couple, and sadly they leave behind 2 young children, which for this small town is just going to be devastating. Kane Simons is another person who has been identified officially. He was originally from Tasmania. Now, we're still waiting for official confirmation on the identities of the other 7 victims, but already community groups from across Australia have started paying tributes to them, which I guess just shows how widespread this tragedy is being felt. And one of the people who's been here on the ground in Singleton all day is the local Mayor, Sue Moore, and she told me just how the community will be faring going forward.
We have a brilliant community base in Singleton. Everyone pulls together, whether it's bushfires, floods or anything of that nature. So I know people will do the same again. Rotary Club's already talking about how they can fundraise, and that's great. And I'm sure there'll be heaps of others that'll pull together to fundraise for the families that are suddenly left with this devastation.
There's a significant investigation underway. What are the kind of key questions in your mind?
I have lots of questions in my mind, but I'm not going to present any of them now. I'm waiting for the investigation reports to be finalised. I guess my only thoughts, and I said to the police officer this morning, usually you get on the bus and you're told the left side of the bus is the side to sit on because that's away from the traffic. It wasn't the case in this one. It's a roundabout I travel quite often. I know it's got a tricky curve on that one, but you take it easy and it's not a problem. So I don't know what the problem was, but it certainly had a devastating effect.
What do you think's to come in the days and weeks ahead for Singleton?
Well, we'll all pull together. We do. This is a hard one. This is pretty tough. We haven't had anything like this for a long time, but we will get through it.
How's your state of mind at the moment?
Yeah. Got 2 feet underneath me and I'm keeping on going. It's all good.
Singleton Mayor Sue Moore ending that report on the fatal bus crash in New South Wales. It's his think tank on wheels, and that's why monopoly-busting entrepreneur Tex Edwards is offering a reward almost equal to the value of his stolen car that he really wants back. The Lexus, that's more than a decade and a half old, was nicked from outside the 2 Degrees founder's Grey Lynn home overnight Monday, and he's put up a $5,000 reward for its return. Edwards, who's pushing for the government to break up the 2 big supermarket chains, says he does some of his best thinking in the car that he got around the same time he launched the market disruptor 2 Degrees.
Fabulous service from the team at Lexus Auckland. They treat me like royalty. They've looked after the car for 17 years. And I think a lot in my car. I'm convinced it was the supermarket cartel operators who stole it. And I flicked out a reward on social media because we know that social media brings the best out in people sometimes. And so there's a $5,000 reward if I can get the car back.
Well, take that supermarket comment as slightly tongue-in-cheek, Tex. When you say you do a lot of your thinking in this vehicle, when did you get it? And does the timing of when you got the car have any significance in particular?
Oh, it's a matte black Lexus IS 250. I bought it, I'm going to say brand new in 2006 or 2005. I've driven it ever since. It's never let me down. It's a great vehicle. But I bought the car when I was able to finance the 2 Degrees adventure, which is a back in the day entrepreneurial episode I had.
Tex, inside the vehicle, there's some commentary that there might be a few empty coffee cups in there. What's the deal with that?
There's Peppa Pig. There's chapter and verse of Peppa Pig. My young 6-year-old son is very upset that he's lost Peppa Pig stories. But there's like 20 or so coffee cups. I do drink 3 a day, yeah.
Are you superstitious about this car? Is it a bit of a good luck charm, given you got it around the time you went for it with 2 Degrees?
Not really. I just think I'm like every other Kiwi. You know, they get attached to their daily ride. They think in their car. They talk in their car. They do all sorts of interesting dietary stuff. And I just like it back, to be frank. And it's just an intrusion into my daily routine. So hence the reward. And yeah, I'm just one of those people who don't change their cars that often.
Hey, you could practically buy a new vehicle with the money you're offering for this. You're offering $5,000, right, for the return of your car?
Yeah, I mean, most of my friends wouldn't say it's worth $5,000, but it's worth $5,000 to me. Maybe I should up the offer to $10,000, see if I can get it back. But no, it's just one of those things that social media is great sometimes. It really works to people's positive DNA, and humour is the DNA of perseverance. So out goes the reward. Can the car come back? All cars have sentimental value to drivers and owners. I'm no different, and the police have got better things to do than chase my car.
No concerns, Tex, about potentially paying a ransom for your vehicle?
Oh, not really, Lisa.
So your message then, Tex, to whoever's got it or whoever may have spotted it about its return, what would you like to say to anyone who knows the whereabouts of your car?
Could you drop it back in Grey Lynn and leave the keys in the dashboard and contact me through social media anonymously? Yeah, it'd be great.
Tex Edwards there. Maybe not leave the keys on the dashboard. Maybe be a little bit more discreet if you are assisting in the return of that. Let's get to some of your feedback quickly on KiwiSaver. This person says those KiwiSaver disparity figures could easily be fixed by increasing significantly the support taxpayers provide to mothers for, say, 5 years. This one says my female partner took a significant share of my male KiwiSaver balance under relationship property rights. To what extent has this equitable KiwiSaver right balance been factored in by the Financial Markets Authority? Another person says women work 5 hours fewer per week in the paid workforce and choose not to do high-paying jobs, such as working on oil rigs, deep-sea fishing and storm and natural disaster recovery jobs.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening. I'm Karen McCarthy. Police say gang members in Ōpōtiki are behaving well ahead of a mongrel mob leader's burial. The tangi for mongrel mob barbarians president Stephen Taiatini has seen an increased gang presence in the Bay of Plenty town. Area Commander Tristan Murray told Checkpoint that the situation is under control and there's no risk to the public.
Oh, we're well on top of it. In fact, it's been quite underwhelming, and I've got to say, the gang members present at the moment, the vast majority of them are very well behaved. I went past their gathering a couple of hours ago, and there's a bouncy castle out the front for the kids.
Tristan Murray says there's always a risk when dealing with gang members, but the majority are just in the town to mourn. The Gore District Council has voted not to receive a petition calling for its Chief Executive Stephen Parry to resign. Mayor Ben Bell and Mr Parry aren't speaking, and the fallout of that relationship has caused ongoing problems for the council. A group of councillors last month called on Mr Bell to step down, but backed down from a public vote of no confidence. The petition came in response. Almost 5,000 people signed it, but most were not from Gore. Deputy Mayor Keith Hovell says the petition lacks credibility.
We've got to ask the first question, what have we actually received? We've received some comments made on Facebook where a number of people have agreed with it. It's no different than something appearing on Facebook and getting a whole lot of likes. But what actually are they liking?
Several other councillors spoke strongly against it. Only Ben Bell voted against the motion not to receive the petition. An Auckland Business Association says a number of organisations need to pull their weight if they want the central city to remain a vibrant place. The Auckland CBD is coming back to life after years of pandemic slowdown and construction works disruption. Heart of the City Chief Executive Viv Beck says when it comes to infrastructure projects in Auckland, it's the job of multiple organisations, including council, to ensure the central city runs as smoothly as possible.
A lot of those things, one group might do one piece and another group does something else, so they're not always integrated, and we've been keen to see a much more integrated, less siloed plan for some of these works.
Viv Beck says they're seeing around 1 million people on the streets weekly. A lawyer who has worked with Bill of Rights prisoner claims believes the prison system is breaching both New Zealand and international laws. A report into the country's 18 prisons says thousands of inmates had experienced segregation over the course of a year. The Office of Inspectorate says between October 2020 and September 2021, almost a third of prisoners had spent time separated from others. Amanda Hill says there could have been numerous breaches of law by corrections. She says the report reflects system failings at almost every part of the segregation process. A federal judge in the United States has rejected a request by news organisations to be allowed to photograph and video an initial court appearance in Miami by the former President Donald Trump. He's due to face dozens of charges of illegally hoarding classified documents at his Florida home after leaving office, including some about nuclear secrets. The 76-year-old has denied wrongdoing. Speaking to reporters, the Democratic Senator Mark Warner appealed to the public to keep any protests peaceful.
I think Mr. Trump deserves his day in court, like any American, innocent until proven guilty. Now, people also have a right to protest. That's a First Amendment right. But my hope and prayer would be, no matter what you feel pro or con on Mr. Trump, that people will protest within the boundaries of the First Amendment and not try to take the law into their own hands.
Parts of Ukraine have again been targeted by Russian missiles and drones. The governor of the Dnipropetrovsk region says there is a massive missile attack on the city of Kryvyi Rih. Serhiy Lysak says there are dead and wounded. The head of the city's administration says Russian airstrikes hit a 5-storey building, among others, adding that there were probably people under the rubble. The CEO of Qantas says its new direct route to New York will mean cheaper prices for New Zealanders. Tomorrow, the Australian airline is launching its direct flight to New York in competition with Air New Zealand's flagship flight launched last September. Qantas Chief Executive Alan Boyce, who is in the country touting his new route, says more competition will mean better airfares.
We've always called Air New Zealand our frenemy, so we're friends on a lot of things, but we're also very competitive. So we're going to be big commercial competitors on this route, and the intent is to continue with those type airfares.
It's the first time Qantas has flown from Auckland to an international destination outside of Australia in more than 2 decades. The host of RNZ Night's program, Karen Hay, has resigned. RNZ said she has left to concentrate on writing projects and wishes her all the best for the future. Ms Hay stopped presenting the show several months ago. The government is tweaking its proposed medicine law changes to create exemptions for rongoa practitioners and small-scale manufacturers. The Therapeutic Products Bill is set to replace the outdated Medicines Act. Under the proposed changes, small-scale natural health product manufacturers won't need to obtain a product authorisation or manufacturing licence. Regulation of rongoa will only apply when products are made for commercial, wholesale or export. Health Minister Aisha Verrill says it's recognition the original bill went too far. The legislation is expected to pass before the election. That's the news.
Kia ora, I'm Mihi Ngarangi Forbes, host of Mata. Tonight we'll discuss the sale of the Auckland International Airport shares with Alf Filipaina. Then I'm joined by panellists Glenn McConnell and Shane Pipo. Nō reira, ariari taringa mai kia Mata after the 6:30 headlines this evening on RNZ National or at rnz.co.nz/Mata.
Back to Lisa Owen and Checkpoint after the short forecast from Met Service to midnight on Wednesday. Northland, mostly fine, isolated showers clearing tomorrow morning. Auckland to North Taranaki, including Tamaranui, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, fine with frosts in the morning. South Taranaki to the Kapiti coast, including Taihape, fine at first, cloudy periods and isolated showers developing this afternoon or evening. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington, showery about and north of the Wairoa district, but only cloudy periods and isolated showers elsewhere. Showers gradually clearing from the south tomorrow afternoon and evening. Nelson, Bulla and Westland, fine apart from morning fog patches, frosty tomorrow morning also. Fiordland, fine today, cloud and isolated showers develop tomorrow morning. For Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine, cloudy periods and isolated showers near the coast, clearing tomorrow morning, and the Chatham Islands, showers. It's 6:07.
Nā mihi Karen, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. More police have been brought into the Bay of Plenty town of Ōpōtiki with about 500 gang members in town. There are fears gang violence could erupt following the killing of prominent mongrel mob leader Stephen Taiatini. Several schools in the town have closed, as has the library, and bus services have been halted. Our reporter Emma Stanford has the story.
As the gang members roll in, 8 schools have closed their gates over safety concerns. Ōpōtiki Primary School Principal Tony Howe says parents are worried about the risk of gang violence.
As opposed to the numbers of people, the mob have been present in Ōpōtiki for a long, long time, and they're generally very well behaved.
Māori Warden Te Owai Gemmell says Ōpōtiki College, which is closed until Monday, is across the road from Mr Taiatini's family home.
Right next door is the early childhood centre, and straight opposite that is the Ashbrook School. Right bang smack in the middle. I mean, the kids have to go past there. There's cars all up, parked up all around. It was full up yesterday. They had to block that road off.
She says gang members are entitled to pay their respects.
A lot of them are coming in on bikes, and they're also very respectful. As we were going down the street one part there, we knew it was them because they were wearing their colours, and they pulled up and waited till we went past, so they're not causing any havoc that I'm aware of.
Mayor David Moore says he's been working with the gangs to keep the peace while mourning.
Local iwi leaders and local police, and I was involved in this. We've been working very hard. This is a process to try and keep some calm and also get some reassurance.
But he concedes there have been arsons and gunshots since the gang members have been in town.
I can't deny that's happened. It has heightened everyone's anxiety levels, I guess, and that's rightly so. But the police are doing a very good job. Yeah, we're just doing the best we can.
National Party leader Christopher Luxon says a town should not be shut down by gangs.
And now we're in a position where our schools are closed, bus services aren't running, and 2 houses have been firebombed. And the Prime Minister this morning says it's actually not his job. Well, I have to say, Prime Minister, it is your job to actually make sure that New Zealanders feel safe in their own homes, their own businesses, their own community. And it is your job to make sure you're not sending a message that you're soft on crime.
Eastern Bay of Plenty Acting Area Commander Tristan Murray says police are well on top of it and there is no danger to students.
I guess what's alarming for the community is just the large amount of numbers, which unfortunately when you have a funeral of this sort of level, you're going to get a big gang presence. And we acknowledge that that's alarming for the community, and that's why we've brought in quite substantial extra police resourcing.
However, he says retaliation to Mr Taiatini's death is always possible.
Our communication with the gangs is that if they step out of line, the New Zealand police will be taking action against them. There's no ifs or buts around that. So that's been made very clear to them, and we have sufficient resources here to suppress any activity to the contrary.
Mr Taiatini will be farewelled in Whakatane tomorrow.
That report from Emma Stanford. First it was New York and now Florida is the setting for the latest legal showdown involving former President Donald Trump. The former president's arrived in Miami ahead of a court appearance tomorrow, facing federal charges over his handling of top secret documents. The ABC's Barbara Miller reports from Miami.
There are about 24 hours to go before the former president is due here at the federal courthouse in Miami, but already members of the media are lining up in pretty hot and sultry conditions. What's your name?
Will Pavia.
And who are you with?
The Times of London.
Have you come from London?
I came from New York, actually. I flew in this morning.
And you're prepared to wait here all night?
I think so, unless I can find a line sitter. I've started having a look, but I don't know how easy that will be in Miami. They don't have the same sort of Broadway queuing culture, so we'll see.
Vastly outnumbered by the media are a few curious onlookers.
From what I heard, they're very serious if you're really looking at the national security issues, that's pretty serious. Doesn't matter if other people have had stuff too. I mean, charges are charges.
When Donald Trump arrives at court tomorrow, he'll face 31 counts of willfully retaining classified documents, including those with top secret markings relating to matters of national defence. He's also charged with obstructing an FBI investigation into his handling of the documents and with making false statements. Prosecutors say they want a speedy trial, but Anthony Michael Christ, professor of law at Georgia State University, says expect the Trump team to drag things out.
You will see, I think, in every step that he possibly can, the former president and his team will try to push this off as late into 2024 or 2025 as they can.
Also due in court tomorrow is Donald Trump's valet, Walt Nauta, charged with conspiring with his boss to withhold and conceal classified documents.
The real question with the second co-conspirator indictment is whether or not the Department of Justice and Jack Smith will be able to turn him into evidence. If they're able to offer him a relatively light deal, there might be an incentive there for him to testify against the former president, which could really change the dynamics.
While his appearance in New York on charges relating to alleged hush money payments passed off peacefully, authorities here say they're taking no chances. Miami Police Chief Manny Morales.
Make no mistake about it, we're taking this event extremely serious. We know that there is a potential of things taking a turn for the worst.
These are unprecedented times, and the Miami police say they're prepared for a crowd of anywhere between 5,000 and 50,000 people.
One of the most dominant and divisive political figures in Italian public life, the billionaire media tycoon and former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, has died. He was 86. He led 4 governments between 1994 and 2011 and became the longest-serving Italian Prime Minister since the Second World War. A state funeral will be held in Milan on Thursday for the man who was also known for his colourful and scandalous private life, as CNN's Barbie Nardo reports.
The Jesus Christ of politics, the best political leader in Europe and the world. That is how Silvio Berlusconi once described himself. And without a doubt, he was a powerful political operator and businessman who sparked more than one scandal. And despite a string of legal trouble and dubious friends, Berlusconi always managed to bounce back.
Mi ha troppo emozionato.
He made his name as a business tycoon. He owned the famous AC Milan football club for 31 years. At one point, he was the richest man in Italy.
I have always been adored by those who have worked with me.
First elected as prime minister in 1994, he was quickly removed when his coalition partners pulled out. But he was elected to the top job twice more, in 2001 and 2008, becoming Italy's longest-serving prime minister since World War II. And voters brought him back to power in 2022 as a coalition partner with Giorgia Meloni and Matteo Salvini. Charming and with a flippant sense of humor, Berlusconi's off-the-cuff remarks and missteps with protocol were often criticized. He welcomed the newly elected U.S. president in 2008 by complimenting Barack Obama on his, quote, suntan, and left German Chancellor Angela Merkel waiting during a NATO summit. And his close friendship with Vladimir Putin got him in hot water after he disclosed he had re-established his friendship with the Russian president in late 2022, after Putin sent him 20 bottles of Russian vodka for his birthday. He later blamed Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky for starting the war, putting him at odds with Meloni. The Prime Minister often surrounded himself with beautiful women. Allegations of a relationship with an 18-year-old aspiring model, which he strenuously denied, triggered a painfully public divorce. And revelations about his so-called bunga parties landed him in court on charges of abuse of power and having sex with an underage prostitute. Allegations he also denied.
It is absurd to think that I have paid to have rapport with a woman.
Meanwhile, the Eurozone was going through a financial crisis. Italy was hit hard and the government's debt ballooned to 120% of the GDP in August 2011. The Italian Prime Minister promised to crack down on tax evasion and introduce other austerity measures, but it was not enough. Berlusconi lost his majority in parliament and was forced to resign as prime minister in November 2011. In 2012, he was convicted of corporate tax fraud and banned from public office. Months later, an Italian court found Berlusconi guilty on the charges stemming from the bunga parties. An appeals court later overturned the conviction. He was voted out of parliament in 2013. 2 years later, convicted of bribing a senator a decade before, but never served time since the statute of limitations timed out in the same year.
Io sono innocente.
At the age of 82, Berlusconi managed another comeback. He led his Forza Italia party in the European elections and won a seat in parliament. A month before he turned 86, he led his party back to power as the junior partner of the current ruling coalition. In the summer of 2020, a few weeks away from turning 84 years old, Berlusconi was struck by COVID-19 and was hospitalized for 12 days. He called that experience the most dangerous test of my life and boasted to journalists that his viral load entity of the virus
was the highest one amongst tens of thousands.
Few could match the one and only Silvio Berlusconi. And even though the, quote, Teflon Don, as he was known, was in and out of the hospital in his later years, he always managed to look remarkably younger than his years.
It is 18 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Some more of your feedback now. This is about Ōpōtiki, gang tangi there with hundreds of patch members in town. The police also have a heavy presence there after the killing of a gang leader over the weekend. Ant says, I think they should move him from acting to permanent commander. This is the police officer we did an interview with. He handled your questions well, gave confidence that he has the increased capacity and intent to intervene when needed. Better than roadblocks and overreaction that may only inflame the situation. Thanks for getting in touch, Ant. This one, though, from another listener. Oh, they're lovely boys, but we need to close the schools because we are scared. This country is a joke, that person says. Tributes are flowing in for those unaccounted for following the deadly wedding bus crash in Hunter Valley, New South Wales. Police say they can't formally name those who died. The Singleton Roosters AFL club are mourning the loss of a number of their members, as the ABC's Rachel Mealy reports.
New South Wales Police say identifying the victims is a painstaking process. Acting Assistant Commissioner David Waddell says next of kin have been informed, but the formal processes may take some time.
We will work through that disaster victim identification process over the next few days. Our investigators, our family liaison officers are speaking to the families and the victims. We are in contact That process will continue throughout the investigation and throughout the court process.
Police say the passengers on the bus ranged in age from 20 to 60. 14 people remain in hospital and 2 of those are in critical but stable condition in intensive care. Assistant Commissioner Waddell says first responders came upon a confronting scene on Sunday night.
We have had debriefs with our police last night, as no doubt the other emergency services have. Some of our police are visibly distraught. It was a very chaotic scene. Obviously, we have good processes, and as the emergency services come together, we've worked well, and it's been a very thorough investigation. We'll continue to do that. But at the time of that initial response, it was quite chaotic for those attending police and other emergency services, so we'll continue to work with those personnel as we will with the community.
Singleton physiotherapist Andrew Scott and his wife Lennon Scott both died in the crash. They leave behind 2 young children. A match report on the local AFL club's website praised Lennon for her handling skills during a recent game. Tasmanian man Kane Simons has also been identified. A tribute was posted by the Carlton Park Surf Lifesaving Club. President Christine Gabby wrote on behalf of the Simons family. She says, Kane, otherwise known as Superman, was an amazing athlete who competed at the highest level. But more than that, he was a leader, a great bloke and a mate to many.
Thousands of people in the Philippines have been evacuated from their homes as the nation's most famous volcano, Mount Mayon, continues to spew lava and poisonous gas. The BBC's Niana Mena has more.
Mount Mayon turned the sky red as molten lava began to ooze down the slopes of the volcano on Sunday. While some tourists camped out to watch the spectacle, more than 13,000 residents fled to seek shelter. The volcano, most famous for its perfect cone shape, is situated on Luzon Island in the north, where a huge farming community live and work. Dozens of families carry children and belongings onto trucks and military vehicles to find shelter in some of the 18 evacuation centres based in local schools. One evacuee is Janet Esello.
We're sheltering inside an evacuation centre and our situation is difficult. It's very humid, we don't have enough water and other basic needs.
Another evacuee is Paquita Malate.
We had to evacuate because we've already inhaled ash and sulphur and it's not good for our health.
Mayon lies in a region where earthquakes and volcanic activity are common due to its position on the Pacific Ring of Fire, where tectonic plates meet. 5 years ago, Mayon displaced tens of thousands of people after spewing tons of ash, rocks and lava. The Philippines' most powerful eruption in recent decades was in Mount Pinatubo in 1991 that killed more than 800 people.
To the US now, where an Illinois man is thanking a family from Indiana for his second chance at life. In a rare moment in medicine, an organ recipient was able to meet the family of the young man who donated his heart and liver and saved a life.
With this warm embrace, Tracy Sperry holds on to the man who now holds on to her son's liver and heart.
It means everything to me and my family for that donation. I mean, I wouldn't be here without it. So, there's just nothing else you can say. There's no amount of thanks you can give them for that.
Once Kenneth Billington's health started to decline, the father of 3 was afraid he would never get this moment to hold on to his newly born great-granddaughter and celebrate another Christmas with his family.
That year, my injection fraction was down to 10%, and that's barely enough to pump the blood through your system. It wasn't going to get any better, and by the time this all come around and I got up to Chicago, they told me I had cirrhosis of the liver from the enlarged heart all my life. I was on kind of death's door when I went up there, and if they hadn't found a donor for me, I may not be here.
You know, I'm not mad at God anymore for taking him because I realized that this was his purpose.
Shortly after, their 20-year-old son, Evan Turnhoon, passed away. Evan's mom and dad learned 2 of his organs, his liver and his heart, were donated to a person in the next state over. So they got in the car and took the 5-hour-long drive to Canton, Illinois, to visit the man who now carries a piece of their son with him.
That was his purpose in life. It's hard to give him up, but that's what God intended him to be and to do.
Along with family pictures to remember Evan, his mother only has this teddy bear that replays Evan's exact heart rhythm as her only memory of him. On Saturday, both of Evan's parents got to hear their son's heartbeat once again, this time inside of Billington. Both of them say their son was debating on going back to school for psychology because he just wanted to help people. And now he is.
I've always believed God's got a purpose for each of us in this life, and I feel like Evan's organs going to Kenny, was purpose. He was put here for that, and it took me a while to understand that and come to terms with that, because I miss my son.
He questioned God when, just going through life, just trying to figure things out, and he questioned what his purpose in life was and what he was meant to do. And I really feel he figured that out. I think when he decided he wanted to help people, that he knew that somehow that was what he was going to do. I don't think any of us realized how that was going to happen, but this is how it happened. And we're so proud of him for his decision to be an organ donor. That was his choice.
And finally tonight, it is a feature of British life that's shared with a few other countries. The cryptic crosswords. Some love them, some hate them, and some just don't get them. But for those who adore the cryptics, the creators behind the crosswords are treated with reverence. Sadly, the man known as the world's most prolific crossword compiler, Robert Squires, has died at the age of 91. He produced 80,000 cryptic crosswords across a range of newspapers and publications. The BBC's David Silito looks back at his life.
If you were to disturb Presbyterians, what would you get? Admirers of Roger Squires will at the moment be shouting the answer at the radio. For the rest of us, I'll leave you to ponder. In The Guardian, he was Rufus, an allusion to his initials, RFS. In the FT, Dante, a magician he admired. He too dabbled in magic. In The Independent, he was Hodge, Bauer and Icarus. Icarus, a reference to his days in the Fleet Air Arm and the moment he escaped a plane that had sunk 60 feet into the waters off Sri Lanka. He was also an actor, memorably squashed by a giant robot in Doctor Who. And he even made it into the Guinness Book of Records. He was prolific. 8 crosswords a day, 40 a week. He worked for the Glasgow Herald, the Birmingham Post, the Radio Times, and on Mondays, the Telegraph. Mondays have always been the gentlest day in the cruciverbalist week, and Roger Squires always wanted to delight rather than defeat his audience. For instance, Giggling Troll follows Clancy, Larry, Billy and Peggy who howl, wrongly disturbing a place in Wales. 58 letters is, of course, an anagram of
Llanfair Pwllgwyn Gillogero Chwyndrobwyll Llantysilio Gogogoch.
And another favourite.
The one that I seem to be most known for is a bar of soap for The Rover's Return. Once you realise soap is a soap opera and a bar is a pub, a bar of soap is just a pub in a soap opera.
And so, disturb Presbyterians? Disturb is the clue. It's an anagram of Presbyterians. The answer, Britney Spears. That's how good he was.
That makes my head want to explode like a melon in the hot sun. Before we go, some of your final thoughts on Gore. This person says, why not let the people have a vote on the chief executive? Imagine if local democracy was actually a democracy. The idea that the public isn't smart enough to choose a chief executive is both arrogant and anti-democratic, that person says. On gang activity in Ōpōtiki, Leave the funeral be, don't wish trouble into being. The police presence should be discreet, that person says. Now, don't forget, ko te kaupapa tuatahi Ōpōtiki. Tune in tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up is live in Miami as former US President Donald Trump is due to appear in court. And kaua e wareware te atatero i a mātou kōrero. Do check out all our videos and stories. They will be online. Have a great evening. Kia pai tōpō.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Bay of Plenty police say gang members gathered for mongrel mob leader Stephen Taiatini's burial tomorrow are behaving peacefully. Mr Taiatini died in an altercation in Ōpōtiki on Friday. The office overseeing prisons says corrections has not been keeping adequate data on how long and how often prisoners are sent to segregation. Nelson Fishing Company West Fleet Fishing, its skipper and first mate have been fined almost $70,000 for failing to weigh and report coral caught when bottom trawling. And a federal judge in the US has rejected news organisations' request to photograph and video former President Donald Trump's court appearance in Miami tomorrow on charges of illegally hoarding classified documents. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather.